It's Doug McIntyre, the editor of Climate Crisis 247, and Dave Calloway, who's the other editor of Climate Crisis 247, is with me. We're going to talk about something today that the head of Stellantis, which owns Chrysler and some other car companies, is called the EV bloodbath. And his point was, A, EV sales are not as fast as he thought they'd be. And B, Tesla has started a price war. So with slowing sales, Tesla is prepared to cut its margins down to keep market share, which means that everybody else is going to lose money. So what's your reaction to his bloodbath comment?
I think it accurately describes where we are in this market right now, Doug. I mean, EVs came on strong. I mean, Tesla's been around for 10 years, but nobody ever bought a Tesla because they wanted to fight climate change. They bought a Tesla because it was really cool, had amazing pickup with the electric engine. And then so all the other auto companies decided they were going to get into the EV game too. China is selling massive amounts of EVs, but the Chinese ones are cheap, right? They're low cost. So somewhere along the line, everyone that decided to get into the EV game in the U.S., Stellantis and Ford and GM, decided that these were going to be luxury items and high-priced items. The cost of making the battery, the components for the battery, are expensive than your basic fossil fuel generated options. So now we're seeing the results of overinvestment in that for the last couple of years. People are still buying EVs, but the rate is slowed dramatically. Tesla's earnings recently showed that. I think Elon Musk said something about like notable declines in sales growth this year in 2024. So I don't think it's wrong to call it a bloodbath. It's going to take a little while for this capacity to work through the system.
It's interesting. After he made that comment, Tesla lost $70 billion in market cap in a day. That is larger than the market cap of either GM or Ford. So Stellantis is one of these legacy car makers like, Mary Barra's GM, Bill Ford over at Ford. They have a second problem, and that is that particularly in Europe and the United States, the governments have made statements about their expectations of what percent of your fleet has to be EV. Some 2030, 2032. Every company has a different goal of its own, and every country has a different goal of its own. So these companies are, in some cases, trapped by their own decisions about an evolving business model, but also by what the government has told them they have to do.
Absolutely. And, that's happening here in the U.S. too. In California, where I am, the state has said, that it intends to have all electric vehicles by 2035 or something like that. There's almost no way that's going to happen, right? I mean, you can't even, first they got to get to the point where they're only selling electric vehicles, right? And we're nowhere near that point right now. I think EVs, something like, 8 or 10%, 8% of vehicle sales last year. And even though they're more popular in California, it's still just a fraction of what traditional vehicles are, the range anxiety issue. But you're right, these automakers are trapped because the governments are saying this is going to happen, and they want to be in the game, but they're not getting any bang for their investment because nobody's yet buying them. Cars take a long time to you buy a car, it's going to last you a while. So it's going to be a while before we shift dramatically to EVs. I'm one that thinks that Tesla's right to initiate a price war. It's the only way we're going to get people to even look at them again. Government subsidies worked, but that's too costly. You need lower prices.
There has been a financial tension that didn't just start with EVs. If you go back in time, probably 2.5 decades, the federal government would say your fleet has to average 29 miles to gallon. They go to the car companies, say, if you want to have gas guzzlers, then you're going to have some cars with small engines because we're going to mandate to you what the gas mileage averaged across your entire fleet is. This is sort of an extension of that, isn't it?
It really is. It really is. And, and that's been a national political issue in the past couple elections, right? As to how far states should have to go to follow, as they call it, the California model, where they are always mandating this stuff. I think, what's really happening, like in most industries, is there's black and white, and what ultimately ends up happening is gray. What you're seeing is people are moving into the hybrid vehicles, right? They're willing to have some electric, but they want the benefit of gas powered if they need it. Those vehicles are cheaper, they're more reliable. The vehicle makers, it helps them meet some of those standards. So we're starting to see that hybrid business really pick up. And the ones like Toyota and Honda and stuff that have been big on hybrids for a long time are going to benefit from that.
The grandson of the founder of Toyota Motor last week said, and he's the current chairman, we're not going to be an EV company. This is to your point. Toyota is the largest car company in the world by revenue. He said, we're going to be in gas, EV, hydrogen, hybrid. We're not going to go in to Las Vegas and put all of our money on, one number. We're going to spread that across a whole bunch of them. And what I hear you saying is that has ended up being sort of the brilliant play.
Right. It's just all he's doing is realizing that the so-called EV transition is going to take a lot longer than anyone thinks. So he's going to make as much money as he can in every particular avenue until such time as demand for one of those avenues dries up.
It impresses me that if you're going to get high EV adoption, that probably the federal government is going to have to give significant incentives to infrastructure providers, because there are about 130,000 gas stations in the United States. So if you and I have a gas-powered car and we want to go anywhere, that we can find a gas station, and for about, not where you are, but where I am, for about $3 a gallon, fill my car up, and 5 minutes later, I'm on my way. Charging stations in some areas are impossible to find. There aren't enough of them. And in cold weather, they don't necessarily work. So you've got yet another problem, that if the government cannot help give incentives beyond Tesla, I understand they're doing it, but beyond that, there has to be a reason to build these things if sales are slowing.
Yeah, and the Biden administration spent a lot of money on charging infrastructure. Still hasn't solved the problem, and we're still not seeing, enough charging stations around. But there's not enough, there's not the demand for them. It's like they actually are going to have to build them before the demand gets there, and that's a difficult investment proposition, Doug. So, what I think is going to happen is eventually we won't have the traditional service station. There'll be charging stations everywhere. We see them in the malls now and at restaurants and certainly in our homes. And so charging stations will become more ubiquitous, but there won't be, a central service station that people go to recharge, like they go to refuel now. But that's going to take more investment, and I think it's going to take private investment, to be honest, because somebody's going to have to put up that money, on the bet that it's going to pay off.
I think that probably ends up being right. If you look at the car industry model today, you've got a financial problem that I don't think can go away, particularly places like GM and Ford. You've got these huge amounts of money, billions of dollars you're putting into building EVs, and now you have the resurgence of labor. The UAW has come in. Ford said the new labor contract is going to cost us $8.8 billion between now and 2028. That's exactly the same time that they've got to put a lot of money into their EV infrastructure, or, if the day ever comes when EVs are highly popular, Ford has to be there.
Yeah, it's a tightrope that they have to walk. Clearly, they overestimated what demand was going to be. At least at this point in time, in early 2024, we don't see a huge surge in demand expectations. So, and you're seeing Ford and GM and Stellantis all pull back, in part to save money because of those labor costs. And so, it's again, they need to be there. They're only going to be kind of like trying to do is spend as little as possible to be there and wait until that demand ramps up. Then they're going to be behind the eight ball in terms of production.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to give you the last word, but I would not want to be Bill Ford, the executive chairman of Ford. You can't fire me because it's my family, but I've got a bigger problem than probably any of the Fords that came before me.
I think each generation of Fords has had its own problem, and so far they've managed to keep it going. So I will optimistically think that Bill can handle this, but this is a much different problem than the generation before. The transition to electric vehicles is going to create new leaders in the cycle, and if Ford wants to remain a leader, it's going to have to step up and play that game.
Enjoy the talk. I'll see you soon.
Thanks, Doug.